Hey, we got 7 minutes after 12 o'clock here on a Friday afternoon. Schram hanging with you until 3 o'clock today. I want to thank you for hooking up, and let's just start getting some stuff together here. There's a lot going on at Children's Hospital right now, and I got to tell you, my heart aches for the parents of those two infants that died at the hospital because of mistakes that were made. Children's is now under investigation by the State Department of Health. The hospital itself has said that it will suspend all non-emergency operations for a day to allow staff members to review safety practices, identify weaknesses in the system, and establish some immediate corrections. There's 1,000 staff members have already attended a mandatory review of the hospital's medication policy. I mean, I think there's a lot vested in Children's Hospital. It is an iconic institution here in the region. I mean, it is so well respected and admired, and I think a lot of people, given what has taken place over the past few days here, I think the confidence in that hospital has been shaken to the core. We're joined now by Chris Davis, who's with the David Law Group, because he represents a woman that about a year and a half ago lost her autistic teenage son. He died after receiving a lethal dose of a powerful painkiller. Chris, thanks for being here with us this afternoon. How are you today?
Hi, Ken. Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So, with your experience, and I know there's details of the Blankenship case that we really can't get into, Michael Blankenship and his mom Tammy. But are there additional red flags going up for you, given your involvement with the death of Michael Blankenship, and then witnessing and hearing about what's going on now?
Well, I was actually telling a colleague yesterday that on one hand, I was shocked to hear of these cases because they're very similar, if not identical, to what happened to Michael Blankenship last year. On the other hand, however, as a lawyer who practices in this area, I wasn't surprised because I do know how prevalent these types of errors are in our country. And with the vast majority of them, though, are never reported. So in this particular case, I think the two incidents or three incidences that we're hearing now coming from Children's were actually leaked to the media in the first place. So I don't know whether, Children's went out of volition on their own to report it to the public or whether they tried to keep it under wraps.
When Dr. Fisher, who is Dr. David Fisher, is the medical director over at Children's, and he had a news conference yesterday, and just from one who has, covered these stories for more years than I care to mention, I described what he said as disarmingly candid. Mm-hmm. I thought, and I want your response to see if you thought the same, where he talked about, he said, look, we are devastated. He was all but acknowledging that the hospital made a terrible, terrible mistake, which, like I say, I found that disarmingly candid for such a public admission.
Well, I'm not here to challenge whether Dr. Fisher or the staff feels devastated over these recent losses. I'm sure they do. But I have to point out that much of the same things that he was saying in the press conference last night were said to us, the public, and Tammy Blankenship last year when they held a press conference after we filed suit against the hospital following Michael's death.
Well, let me ask, and I did my commentary today. My oldest son is now 30 years old, and when he was just a few days old, my wife and I, we had to rush him to Children's because he had a fairly significant health problem that had to be dealt with. And with the treatment and the time and the care that he received, thankfully he recovered. And I included that in my commentary because part of me says the following here, Chris. Part of me says my heart absolutely aches for the parents of those infants and for Tammy Blankenship. And part of my heart aches as well for the doctors and the nurses and the staff at Children's Hospital. And in the end, I concluded that, I'm angry. I am angry that these kinds of mistakes occur, and I'm sure that's the reaction that most people have. But I said at the same time, if my eldest son was but a few days old today and had a serious medical problem, I wouldn't hesitate to take him to Children's Hospital. Is that misplaced trust?
Well, I'm not here to unduly criticize Seattle Children's. Of course, they are one of the best pediatric facilities in the Northwest region. They've done a lot of good. They've saved a lot of lives. But at the same time, they've made some pretty egregious errors when treating some of these kids. And, if it's your family, if it's your child, it doesn't matter how many kids the hospital has saved before.
I understand.
On the one hand, yes. If we just look at statistics, and you want to rely on the statistics, the vast majority of the kids, of course, are treated fine, and there's no problem. But I believe that there's a significant minority, enough so that should cause parents to be somewhat concerned. That's my message.
So,
and we're talking, and I don't like to even call them mistakes, Ken, because we're talking about instances where overdose occurs because the doctor doesn't bother to read the contraindications on the drug label.
Okay, well, the Michael Blankenship instance, this tragedy with this autistic teenage boy, he was given a very powerful pain-killing patch, correct?
Correct.
And the reason for that was that he had difficulty taking medication orally.
Correct.
So when you say that the doctors weren't paying attention to what the potential lethality of the painkiller he was given was that out of I don't know how to put this. Was it out of a lack of professional attention? Was it just an oversight? Was it somebody who didn't know what the hell they were doing?
Well, I think all of the above. When we're talking about dispensing lethal drugs to kids, then I don't believe there's such thing as a simple mistake when it comes to overdosing and causing that child's death. When you've got a hospital like Children's with a stellar reputation and they're treating over 1,000 patients a day, they need to make sure that they have systems in place so that there's multiple levels of checkpoints so that prescribing the wrong drug or prescribing the highest dosage or too high of a dosage can be easily detected along the way in that system before that kid gets that drug.
Gotcha.
When you add that to if you add that failure to, and then add, doctors who are prescribing drugs for the first time in their career, and they never read the label with that drug that they're not familiar with, then, my argument that a simple mistake is really reckless.
Okay. Chris, I thank you. I think you've provided us some additional insight that was otherwise would have gone lacking. Thank you for spending some time with us here this afternoon, all right?
My pleasure, Ken. Thanks.
All right, we'll be back in a sec. Stay with us.